Hello and welcome to Esports Boom, your weekly source for all esports business news. I'm Anton Ferraro and I'm joined by Maurice Eisenman. Today we're going to go over a bunch of interesting news. Mo, what are you most excited about this week?
Well, excited isn't the right word, but I think the biggest buzz topic in esports this week must have been the comments by the IOC president Bach regarding esports. So I think we already talked about it in one of our previous episodes about how the Olympics made a statement that they're willing to go into esports and they're looking at esports seriously. And some of, we were excited, not necessarily because esports needs the Olympics, but it's still a good look for the industry as a whole. Well, the IOC president had some strong opinions, to say the least. To summarize it, he only wants sports simulation games to be in the running for the Olympics. I have some quotes written down that kind of summarize it as a whole. He said, "We want to promote non-discrimination, non-violence, and peace among people. This does not match with video games, which are about violence, explosions, and killings."
What year is it?
And we have to draw a line. Esports that mirror those played in real life, like soccer or basketball, could be considered for the Olympics. But those that involve gracious violence and bloodshed, we are against. So what do you think?
Well, I think I tweeted about this earlier, but I really enjoyed the documentary that came out a few weeks ago called Icarus, where they had they basically followed around a guy who doped the Russian team, and he explained, what the purpose of the Olympics really was. And the comment that I find is most ironic and the greatest example of doublethink for you Ray Bradbury fans is that the Olympics say that they want to promote non-discrimination, non-violence, and peace amongst people. And the greatest use of the Olympics in recent history has been Putin at the Sochi Games. He gained a wave of popularity after his country performed exceptionally well due to their use of performance-enhancing drugs, and then used that popularity to then go and invade Ukraine. I mean, it's like, if you look at it from that perspective, the Olympics, are probably the greatest tool to, unify your country and then, use that unification for non-peaceful needs. So the fact that, he's going out and pointing, saying, oh, video games, you're so violent, I mean, that's, borderline hypocritical.
Well, I think, I'm not sure whether we talked about this in the podcast, but I think we all agree that something like Counter-Strike might not be a good fit for the Olympics. Something that's literally about terrorists might not be a good fit for the Olympics, the way the older generation looks at it now.
I agree.
But this whole thing about only virtual sports, traditional sports, esports, as some people call it, is good for the Olympics. It shows how little he knows about esports.
No, I mean, it seems like what was it? Like there was that ESPN executive that went on the record saying, blah blah blah, esports is awful, and then 18 months later or 12 months later, after getting drummed into his head by every person in the space about what it really is, he had to go back and eat his own words. So I'm going to say that this guy, if he even still has his job in 12 months, because the Olympics are always rotating their staff members, he's going to eat his own words. And it's nice that, what is it, the next games are 2018?
I think so, yeah.
So it's 2018 and it's the summer or the winter games?
2018 is the winter games, if I'm correct.
Okay, so maybe, by the 2020 Olympics, then, maybe they'll be included.
Yeah, well, just to get back on the topic, I understand you don't want to have Counter-Strike, but there are games that mirror that aren't traditional esports style, that can bring something unique to the table.
What game are you thinking of right now?
The most logical one is Rocket League. I mean, here's a game that's easily understandable. It might not be as big. It can bring in a unique audience.
Yes.
FIFA and NBA 2K won't bring in unique audiences.
I disagree. I think, to be fair, those games I think are much more popular than
they're more popular. But will they bring in an audience that they will bring in the same audience that would watch the soccer game.
That's fair.
Where I think, or watch the basketball games. Where I think the Rocket League, which is quite popular, will bring in a new slew of people. I think Hearthstone, although I'm a bit biased because it's my favorite title, I think it mirrors kind of some of the thinking games that aren't as athletic but are still part of the Olympics. It has a very strong core audience that I don't think there's a lot of overlap with the Olympics. And I still even think like League. While you might have to work with Riot on some things, I think it's not about explosions. Here's a clear game, maybe Dota. Here are games that really are about thinking. They're about reflexes. There's some clear mental ability and physical ability necessary. And I think those games can actually drive a new audience to the Olympics, which traditional sports video games cannot.
And I'm sure like any media entity that exists in the world today, the Olympics themselves are trying to figure out how do we pivot it to digital and how do we monetize it. Mm-hmm. And I think once you start trying to pivot into digital, you're going to want a property like esports and the popular aspects, like the popular games, League of Legends, Dota 2, to make that pivot successful. If you're basically trying to fit in the square peg of traditional sports into the round hole of digital distribution, it's you're gonna incorporate difficulties. Make the journey for your company a little bit easier by adopting the popular titles in the digital space.
Yeah, he also wrote, one of his major concerns was the lack of industry regulators to ensure video game players follow standardized rules. He's talking about doping and all those type of things.
I think that's a self-serving comment. I think he's just trying to say like, oh, the Olympics are holier than thou. And it's like, even if you look at the Olympics, like, okay, they have such an exemplary record of, making sure people don't dope. Come on. You no longer have a platform to promote that.
Absolutely. I think there's one thing which Ben Fisher mentioned a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about the initial news regarding esports and the Olympics, is that in order for a sport to be accepted into the Olympics, it needs to go out of a centralized organization. And because of the way the esports ecosystem, there isn't really, you don't have the federation of League of Legends. It has to come from the publishers. And then there's a whole question of, is this really an independent organization that represents the game, or is this someone with vested interest? So that would bring a whole slew of bureaucratic difficulties before some of these games even get accepted. Those are the same difficulties that you have with FIFA and NBA 2K, a little less, because FIFA doesn't own the game of soccer, and you have in FIFA and EA doesn't own the game of soccer in general.
I feel like they already have, like with all the sports games, they have a relationship with the,
yes.
Like FIFA has to sanction the FIFA games. So I think that, they have a little bit more of a channel into those organizations. Do you think that the Olympics need esports more? So let me rephrase that. Does esports need the Olympics, or does the Olympics need esports?
A clear answer is, esports does not need the Olympics. I think it would be a good look. I think it can bring in a whole slew of sponsors that you would otherwise never get. It can help bring esports to an audience that is completely unaware of esports. Especially when you're looking at countries that aren't as developed, they still watch the Olympics. So I think it has some positive points to it. But the Olympics desperately need something like esports. Viewership numbers have gone down year after year, and they need the millennials, and esports is the millennial sport, and like all these cliches. So the Olympics definitely can use something like esports.
Yeah, and I think Mo and I are pretty much in alignment on this, but just for the sake of providing an alternate opinion, 15, 20 years ago when the Olympics adopted action sports, I thought that was done very well. So in the past, the Olympics have proven that they can pivot into new audiences. I do worry that the changes that they have to make for this one are, they're a couple of years behind. I think it's going to take 18 months of angry tweets to get the Olympics to understand how esports functions, and that they are not going to be able to dictate terms to esports.
Yeah, and talking about traditional organizations, getting into into esports. I mean, the news this morning was all over about NCAA and their search for the holy esports consultant. Can you explain to our audience a bit more about that, Anton?
Sure. So the NCAA is a college organization for athletics, and they have very strict rules about that their athletes, that if you're a student athlete, you can't collect any type of compensation. It's become an uglier and uglier stance as, things like YouTube and Twitch have come around, and, NCAA athletes can't even participate in those services because, those companies pay people, unlike the NCAA. But the NCAA has seen that there has been an enormous surge in college esports. They are trying to figure out, how do we get involved in this? The problem for them is that there has already been an accepted standard where these student athletes that compete in esports, they are financially compensated. And if the NCAA comes in and decides to sanction this, one, they're either going to have to roll back the compensation that the students are getting, which will be incredibly unpopular and will hurt any type of adoption. Or two, if they let it stay, then it creates a clear conflict between the already established standard where traditional student athletes don't get paid and then esports athletes do. And that may cause, the NCAA to lose what is a very lucrative business arrangements where they don't have to compensate their athletes.
Yeah, well, not only that. I mean, I'm not a legal expert, and I will refer. It's always a bad move to refer to your competitors, but I don't consider it to be a competitor. Last week, the Columbia University Sports Podcast had what I would call two of the few experts in this collegiate esports field on there. And one of them actually is a former lawyer, so they could really talk about about the legal actions. One of the big things is the NCAA is currently getting sued. There's a big sue happening. I don't remember the exact name of the sue, but it's about compensation. Mm-hmm. And really, they can't afford to give in on esports with compensation, in my opinion. Nor do I think that if you're an esports player, one of your big ways of getting compensation is Twitch streams and YouTubes, like you mentioned, and NCAA cannot take that away. I mean, it will lead to a horrible rollback. And also, I think the NCAA, and excuse my language, is shitting their pants for the moment when they have an esports player who plays for let's say a Division III team. Or even a Division I team, let's say plays for UCLA, and gets 100 people watching him because it isn't that big, and is able to go to his local GameStop and sign autographs and make $100 that day. Then meets up with the basketball player. The basketball player plays for 10,000 people every single week, and he cannot afford his sandwich.
No, absolutely. As much as I love esports, I don't even feel like we're the biggest reason that the NCAA is going to change. I think that, they're student athletes themselves. You're having people who are graduating with great educations and then coming back to sue the NCAA for all their backwards policies. It's like, you're educating the people that are going to turn against you. I think that, if anything, it'll be used as a great example of, esports will be used as a great example of what happens when you have a competitive environment that the NCAA isn't affiliated with. I also don't envy the person who's going to have to take that consultant job because, obviously somebody's going to take it. I hope that it's somebody who's endemic to the space. I hope it's somebody who understands it. I just feel that it's, he's going to be put into a situation where the NCAA is going to dictate terms to him of make this work where we don't have to pay them. And, he's going to bang his head against the wall for the next 6 months trying to figure it out, potentially hurting his own reputation, his or her reputation. So, I mean, it's not an enviable task. I think that somebody's going to have to make the first step in, from the inside out telling the NCAA to, okay, your policies have to change.
Yeah, more in general when it comes to, collegiate esports. What do you think will be the role of collegiate esports with regard to professional? Do you think it will be a feeder league, or do you think it will be more of a retirement league for players to come back?
No, I don't think it's going to be a retirement league just because the age is so young. I think what it's going to be is it's going to be like a tier 2 league to the professional league. And the idea is it's like, I'm not good enough to make 50 grand a year or 70 grand a year playing professional League of Legends, so I will take that in tuition compensation. So it's kind of like, I'll make whatever little money I can through my side ventures, my YouTube stream, my Twitch stream. I'll play for a college to build up my fan base. I'll get my education. And if I'm lucky enough that, when I'm 22 and I graduate college, a professional team is interested in me for whatever reason, I may pursue a pro path. I think for the top tier talent, you're going to have a lot more of an environment of something similar to LeBron, where at 18 he knew he wanted to go pro. And I think that, the efficiencies of esports are going to facilitate people to forego college in order to maximize their peak earning years.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a combination of what you said, and kind of a retirement and feeder league. I think definitely if you're the top talent, you're going straight to League of Legends. Like, it's the moment you're one of the top 100 players, like, don't even think about college. Go straight to the LCS, or even if you can make Challenger, go straight to Challenger. However, I do think that collegiate esports can help in two ways. First of all, the collegiate esports is going to be so big that there are so many people playing collegiate esports that are never going to make it competitively, and that are able to get a fantastic education, make some money on the side streaming, and that could be great for a lot of people. Being able to pay for your tuition with League of Legends is a dream for so many kids, and let alone their parents.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you compare that to football now, it's like you're not going to have concussion damage.
Yep.
That's great.
And also, it's going to be incredible for I think also the tier 2 players. If you're a tier 2 player, you made 50 grand a year for 5-6 years, you're burnt out of the LCS, all of a sudden you might be an incredible player for UCLA, so using it again, UCLA's League of Legends team.
Is there, okay, so suppose there's no NCAA regulation, NCAA is not involved. Is there like an age limit on what?
Not at all.
No? So
no.
You can't be like a 30-year-old?
Well, that's the great thing about collegiate esports. I don't think you have those limitations. What I do think is that they might set an age limit, maybe at 25 or something, but at some point when you're 25, at some point it becomes very compelling and very easy to say, hey, I make a base salary out of streaming because I was a tier 2 player, I have some popularity on Twitch, but I can go back, get a $50,000-$60,000 education now, and then I can use that to pivot into a different industry or go into esports in a more business way.
Yeah, I do think that there will be people that'll do that. I do think, though, that it's more of an edge case as opposed to like a straight up funnel that you're going to see all these people at 25 go back to college. I do see that it's more of an avenue for tier 2 people that aren't interested in the LCS or aren't going to make it there.
Yeah.
So I think the other one that we were that we were interested about while we're talking about all these organizations is that WESA and Hi-Rez Studio announced a partnership around Paladins Premier League. The member teams include Envious, Fnatic, G2 Esports, Mouse Sports, Native Vincier, Ninjas in Pajamas, Renegades, SK Gaming, Splice, and Virtuous Pro. And Hi-Rez Studios has partnered with the WESA League to split event revenues with participating teams and to guarantee a minimum salary to players. What are your thoughts?
I think this is great. I love the fact that teams and a third-party organization, although WESA is connected to ESL, and I do have some doubts on that, but I do like that there is an independent organization that can represent the wants and needs of the teams, and can be one big partner in saying, hey, Paladins, Hi-Rez, you want to make Paladins a more successful esports title? You need 10 tier 1 and tier 2 teams that can jump into this game all of a sudden. Give us rev share.
No, I think absolutely. It's when you compare this to what Overwatch is doing, it's such an interesting approach. Basically, Paladins and Overwatch are more or less an identical game.
Yes.
But the marketing strategies that these two titles are taking are vastly different when you look at it politically. Paladins is going in and they're saying, yeah, you guys can keep your branding. It's like, why would we throw that away? That's valuable. And Overwatch is coming into this and it's like, we're going to roll everything back, rebrand everything. And I don't want to dive too deep into our next story, but it's interesting. And to their effect, Paladins isn't a bad game. I've spent some time with it. And the viewership, when I looked at when Overwatch and Paladins went head-to-head, we spoke about this in our first episode. Paladins did respectable. I think over at DreamHack Valencia, Paladins had 480,000 viewed hours for their tournament. And that same weekend, for the Shanghai Overwatch World Qualifier event, they had 792,000 hours watched. The fact that Overwatch, for all of its marketing, is not even 2xing what Paladins is doing, and Paladins, I'm not seeing any marketing for it. I'm not seeing any hype anywhere. I mean, that's respectable. I think that, kudos to Paladins for, taking the endemic approach to marketing their esport.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, I think WESA by itself is pretty interesting, because the biggest issue for esports teams is the fact, the cliche is that Hi-Rez owns the game of Paladins, Blizzard owns the game of Overwatch, so they are the strongest negotiating partner. However, something like WESA can say, like, we have 10 teams, 10 really, really good teams that are willing to go into your new esports title, that are willing to work with you, but all of a sudden, we don't represent one individual team trying to scrape into a league, we represent 10 of the top teams. We want certain things. If you give us those things, all of us will move into this game at once, or we'll slowly, move into the game. And all of a sudden, you have 10 really good organizations that can support your league and support your franchise model.
No, and I think if you look at WESA as an entity of ESL, which there's a lot of connections in there, what you're seeing, I think, on a macro scale are the teams and the leagues realizing that they have very little leverage over the publishers and that they're coming together to gain additional leverages. What is that Ben Franklin quote? It's we must all hang together, or we will all assuredly hang apart.
I don't know yet. I have my green card test probably in about 2 years, so I'll know that quote by heart by then.
There we go. So I think this is a nice segue into the Overwatch League, and we explained what Paladins is doing, and Overwatch is doing something very, very different. What are they doing, Mo?
So the Overwatch League, surprisingly, to me at least, they required their teams to create new geolocated brands. So what that means in reality is that if you're Immortals, you cannot go into the Overwatch League as saying Overwatch Immortals. You have to create a new brand. You have to be the Los Angeles Anteaters or something like that, and you have to create a whole new brand. Some examples. Actually, the Shanghai team that is supported by NetEase actually filed for the Shanghai Dragons trademark. So this probably gives you some type of idea. It's going to be very similar to traditional sports. Anta, what are your views on this?
So I think that in order to get the buy-ins, the big buy-ins from traditional sports teams, those sports teams wanted guarantees that they weren't going to get mauled on the internet by already established esports brands. That's why you're seeing teams like Envious and Immortals rebrand after spending 2 years in the space. I think that the issue is that these teams don't have enough leverage to say that, oh, we want to maintain our advantage. I think the other issue is, let's say somebody spends 2 years building a brand inside the Overwatch space, and they decide that, oh, there's, for either success or failure, I want to flip that team and I want to sell it. It is much easier to have it all be packaged up in an Overwatch-specific brand as opposed to try and sell the Immortal slot to, the Los Angeles Rams. So I think, like, long-term, in terms of making the Overwatch teams packageable brands, this makes sense. I think that some of the advantages that the league loses of not having those already recognizable brands like Envious or Immortals be in the space, that there's some risk associated to that. You're giving up some advantages.
I mean, it's very understandable for Blizzard. Very understandable. I mean, after all, I think Noah Winston of Immortals, he had this 3-minute explanation video, and he gave a good example. Bob Kraft, who is the owner of the Boston team, he has the New England Revolution, which is a soccer team, and then he has the Pats, which is his football team. And his soccer team isn't called the Pat Soccer. It's a different brand. It's completely different branding, and it should be the same in esports, was kind of his reasoning. However, The difficulty is that a lot of teams with regionality, which is what Overwatch is trying to push for, it is important that your regionality outweighs your team, your organization outweighs just the one particular title. Because the only way you're going to justify a long-term investment in esports is if you can become Los Angeles esports organization. If you can have the Call of Duty franchise, if that comes out, if you can have the LCS spot, if you can have 3 or 4 different games, so not only can you fill your stadium or your venue more often, but you really become the face of, let's say, Los Angeles esports. This is gone now. And I did, there were some team owners.
Gone or non-existent?
Well, the opportunity is gone now.
Okay.
Because, you won't have Immortals. You might still have Immortals League of Legends, but you're losing the opportunity to say, we own the Immortals is LA's team.
Yeah.
Now you have, Immortals LCS is Los Angeles League of Legends team, and whatever the Los Angeles Anteaters are the Overwatch team of Los Angeles. So that becomes a lot more difficult.
So here's another question that I'm kind of curious on your thoughts of. A lot of these brands, let's say Immortals, TSM, they've built their audience on the back of League of Legends. Do you think that the publishers in their own self-interest are trying to create barriers between their IP and LCS? There is something to be said for cross-promotion. There is something to be said for having unique brands or team brands associated for each game.
Oh no, absolutely. I completely understand where Blizzard is coming from. I agree with your hypothesis. I think Blizzard want certain IP names to be exclusively tied to Overwatch. Similar to what I said, when people think about the Pats, they think about the football team. And the New England Revolution is Boston's soccer team.
I don't really like that. I think that the situation there was, the Patriots are this great brand, and you don't want to pollute it with, maybe what would be a mediocre soccer team. So I think that's protection more so for the Patriots as opposed to it makes business sense. I guarantee that the Boston Revolution would sell way more jerseys if they were the Boston Patriots. I think it's, they just don't want to dilute the Patriots brand.
Yes, but I think the NFL doesn't want that.
Yeah. No,
exactly my point. Bob Kraft would love to sell more tickets because Pats fans will still go to the Patriots games. But the NFL would hate that there's another team that has the Pats logo or has the Pats name.
Because they can't tax that then, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's self-serving. I don't like that example that Noah Winston gave. I don't know. Not a fan.
No, but a fun thing to end this story is that Cloud9 actually has a unique, typical internet age approach to how they're going to pick their name. They're like, we're not original, creative enough to pick our name. Internet, do it for us. One thing that's interesting to note is that unlike the Bodie McBoatface scenario, we're not going to get Teamy Overwatchy McOverwatchface as Cloud9's team. Everyone can submit the names.
Yeah.
Then Cloud9 will pick 5 names that they feel comfortable with, and then the public can pull.
I think Cloud9 should just pick the top 5 names and then pick the number 1 name. I don't think that even giving up 5 names and having some people vote in. I think it's a good way to brainstorm and get a lot of good options. I think ultimately Cloud9 knows which name is in their best interests. So then what else do we have going on this week? I saw that you selected the Luxor Hotel as the latest casino to announce their esports arena.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, I did notice that this story did come out a little while ago. It's interesting that what you're seeing is the Santa Ana Esports Arena company franchising their operations. And correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe they're financed by somebody from China.
The Luxor?
No, Esports Arena.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a story that was out before, but the official announcement was made this week.
Okay.
So the official, public announcement, not just some kind of press release somewhere. And I thought it was an interesting story because I think, and this is kind of a hot take, but I said it a couple times, EDM clubs, esports arenas are the new EDM clubs. The only difference is that like esports arenas cannot draw an audience anywhere near EDM clubs. All these casinos are looking at esports and are saying, oh, this is what EDM was 10 years ago. We just we just take our room, because all casinos have so much room. We just take some of our room, we put in an esports arena, and every weekend we can have a big tournament. That's what they're thinking in their mind, and we can draw in all those people and they're all going to gamble. This is not the case in esports. First of all, you don't have a tournament that can draw a crowd coming in, especially to Vegas, every single weekend. You might have one or two big esports tournaments every single weekend. Those are all around the world, ones that are relevant enough. And to just have your local Vegas scene playing there, that's not an ROI for this.
No, it's a transient town. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get out-of-towners to come in and spend their money. I had an interesting conversation last week with one of the representatives of the city of Las Vegas, and their approach to how they want to build out this whole esports thing. So they're exploring options. They're really into it. When we actually did an activation with Millennial, and we visited the mayor's office, and one of the things that stuck out in her head and that her comms people were really happy about was that the tweet that we, she tweets a lot from her official mayor's account, and the tweet where she was tweeting about esports was the most highly engaging tweet from her account that month. They're definitely tracking the numbers. They're trying to figure out how it's going to happen. They're trying to find a solution, like from the casino's perspective. The casino's take is the biggest on games like slot machines and blackjack. Esports is more of a poker where you are going to want to play against other people as opposed to the house. It would be interesting to see how the casinos could potentially make a house. Maybe get an AI like Dota 2, and then whoever goes the farthest, is considered. You get a reward based on that. I mean, that'd be interesting, especially with all the other stuff.
Well, the casino world is trying really, really hard. I know there's a company in Las Vegas that is working on creating a kind of Counter-Strike clone where there is some form of chance in the game. So skill has some opportunity, but it's also largely chance-driven. And, that's an interesting approach. I was talking to someone who actually organized a tournament in Las Vegas, and he was saying that there actually isn't a lot of what they were really happy about the casino was that there were tons of people coming. It was a tier 2 or tier 3 event. They had a good influx of people, young people. A lot of people actually went to their dedicated gaming space. There wasn't a lot of overlap in the casino. Yeah. And I think a big difference is also that if you're going to an Evo, you might gamble for an hour, right? If you're going to see Calvin Harris is at night, from 11 p.m. For 3 hours. So first of all, the whole day you're going to be gambling. Yeah. The whole day you're going to do stuff in Las Vegas, probably in the hotel, casino. And then when you come back drunk, you're going to gamble again in the casino because it's open 24/7. So it's a perfect audience. And this can be the same for a concert or a magician or whatever you want to say. Whereas for esports, if Evo is there, you're going to be at Evo all day.
So having been to a bunch of tournaments, I will tell you that there is an exhaustion. When we were in, I'm trying to think, at the Mandalay Bay for MLG's event in December 2016, anecdotally, I will say that people would go into that event, hang out for 2 hours, and then go walk around Vegas. Mm-hmm. So you are seeing people trickle in, trickle out. It's not as neat of a formula as Calvin Harris for 3 hours and then gambling for the rest. But it does get people in. I just feel that esports players are gaming nonstop, so that the product that the casinos put out isn't necessarily as much of a novelty for gamers as it is for your traditional, mom and dad coming to Vegas for a good time for a weekend.
Well, the games, I think the games need to evolve.
Yeah.
They need to become more complex. They need to offer, at least give the idea, show that it's something like skill.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually have to end up being so skill driven. It can be chance driven, but at least give the user the idea that it's a skill based game.
Yeah, no, I mean absolutely. It's like I feel like I sat down on a slot machine. I go to Vegas like 6 times a year. I've sat down on a slot machine once, and it's I'm just like, this is so unrewarding.
Yeah, I remember. If I would gamble, I would back home in Amsterdam. I would love to play poker or to play blackjack, because there's some level of skill involved. But just you're getting ripped off with the slot machine.
And it's social too. It's like when you sit down at a poker table with a bunch of people, it's like some of the value that you're getting isn't necessarily from gambling. It's from bullshitting with some guy who you've never met.
Well, yeah. Well, talking about bad investments and potentially bad investments and losing money. There were, 2 actually esports startups getting investments this week. One I think is more interesting than the other. So, esports coaching platform Sensei actually got $4 million worth of venture capital investments for their video game coaching platform. I am familiar with Sensei. I know you said before that you had some opinions on the issue, so I'll give you the first word.
I haven't dove in too deep into all these, but I have noticed that there's a glut of these analytics services coming out. I think a big one that came out a while ago was Mobalytics. They won TechCrunch. You now have Sensei, who's also trying to do coaching. You have Gamemasters, and it's good it's good that they've evolved to the point where it seems like it's analytical. The part that I'm always apprehensive is that even going back 10 years, you had services like Gaming Lessons and LOL Class that had a hard time scaling. And one of the aspects of that was everything was done through a pro, and the pro would, the horror story back in the Halo days was you had Gaming Lessons, and these kids would sit down and pay $200 to, for an hour of training time with a Halo pro. And the Halo Pro would be like, ooh, all I have to do is click this button and I get $200. And so they clicked this button 200 times. They got $200 per hour. And then 8 months later, you had 1,000 kids that were complaining. They're like, I paid $200 and this guy's been ignoring me. And it's like, okay, so that part sucked. I do think that in a platform style model, there's going to be one big winner, probably per game, if not across multiple games. And I'm dubious that that there is that much of a market for. I mean, I don't know. I guess as the esports crowd ages, they're going to want more efficient use of their time. They're going to have more money, so they will pay to learn faster. So yes, there's a business case to be made for that. I just feel like all these companies are taking so much money.
Well, Sensei, they're a coaching platform, so they are similar to what you said before with Halo, where pros or ex-pros are on the platform, and customers can have a lesson for a couple $100 for an hour.
Boomeo, wasn't that a big one?
Well, Boomeo is kind of more of, I think, a video lesson platform. They're by WEMG. Yeah. They're still there. I mean, they just started 6-7 months ago.
Yeah, but are they still around with all those people leaving?
Yeah, because the guy behind Boomeo still is at WEMG. No, I think Casey. What is it named?
Simon, I thought left.
Oh, okay, but I thought Casey Forster or something like that. He is.
I mean, I don't know. This is my pure speculation. I had one guy who was promoting it on my timeline. But yeah, so there's a lot of these services.
So, but anyways, I talked to some people that are actually making more of a subscription video-based platform similar to Boomeo, and I said, why is Sensei not your competitor? And they said Sensei isn't our competitor. Number one, because what you said, it's very difficult to scale, because you only have a handful of pros or people that are at the moment can do this. And if you're talking, they might be able to do 20 people a day or 20 people a week. But what if all of a sudden you need them to do 100? They can't do that. Yeah. Furthermore, a lot of these fans are 14-year-olds who just watched just play with the pro because they love the pro.
Yeah.
And the pros are actually complaining to services like Gamemasters are saying, I want to teach these kids. Yeah. And I'm not able to teach them because the first 45 minutes in this hour that they got as a gift from their parents is all about, hey, I love your videos, you know, I love this, you're the best, how is this, how is this, how is this? So,
and even for League of Legends, isn't there like an issue where, what is it called when you get somebody to boost you?
Yeah, boosting. I mean, you know, there are ways to do it without boosting, but I just think that this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I hope it goes well. I think there's a lot of potential in esports coaching, especially for younger kids. I think we will get to a point in the near future, or maybe 10, 15 years from now, and maybe far off future, where you will get, you know, local esports, maybe local League of Legends kind of coaches, similar to what you have with soccer, where parents can drop their kids off for a couple hours. They can train with a coach that knows how to train them, that might have been a trainer at a local college that taught esports.
Somebody with credibility.
Exactly. So I think that might be good for some, you know, individuals in the future. This platform, I don't think it's worth the $4 million, but I hope I'm proven wrong.
So let's play a little game. I think it's the end of the month, and you know, we're talking about, you know, whether or not this is a good investment or a bad investment. Mo, I'm going to tell you a number, and the service that raised that number in the millions of dollars. You tell me whether or not you think that they overpaid or underpaid.
Okay.
You ready? We're going to go over the August 2017 venture capital. I'm going to give Mo the number and the service, and he's going to tell me his thoughts on it. All right. So let's start off with the old tried and true. We talk about them every episode. $9.8 million for Sliver VR.
I think they overpaid.
Okay. 3.7 for Gawkbox. I'm trying to remember what Gawkbox is.
Oh, so Gawkbox actually is it's a service where you pay streamers per download of your game. So if you have a game or an app, you can integrate that with your app and with the stream, so that streamers can, when their fans download your game, they get $1 in their bank account. $3.7 million I think is overpaid, but I do think Gawkbox has a lot of potential.
Okay. Better than Sliver.
Yes.
Okay. 19 million for the publishers of Vainglory.
That was just an influx of cash. I don't know how much they got for it. I mean, they're doing really well. I don't know whether that's overpaid or underpaid because I don't know what the percentage is. I think they're worth that and more because I think they're doing really, really well. Okay.
35 million to Envious. So that's Overwatch League and that's LCS.
Assuming they get both spots, it's fair because it's the money they need to get. Once again, I don't know the percentages. Let's say if you get the whole of Envious for that and you get the spots in Overwatch League and LCS, I think it's pretty reasonable because that's the money they need to get in anyways. But I don't know the percentages. But I will say it's pretty even.
Okay. $11 million for Smash GG.
Overpaid.
Yeah, I overpaid by a lot. And then the last one I think was $4 million for Gamer Sensei.
Overpaid.
Okay. And the other one, I guess it's not, you know, okay, let's play the second part of this game. Greycroft raised $15.6 million for a fund for VR, AR, and esports. Mo, if you could spend that $15.6 million in esports right now, what would you spend it on?
That's a very tough question. I think I would get an LCS spot. I think that's because I believe that the rev share will make up for it in the future. Or I would pay it in smaller companies that have a lot of potential and not overpay. How about you, Anton?
I would take that money and figure out some way to marry esports with cryptocurrency. I think cryptocurrencies, you know, ICOs right now, they're super sketchy. You know, I totally get why people are apprehensive of them. I do think that cryptocurrency, though, is something that you're seeing great returns on. I think that it can be a vehicle to transfer the social capital that esports enjoys directly into financial capital. Mm-hmm. I think there's great opportunities there. And I think that, you know, you could recoup that money in 18 months, which would be excellent, and then some. So yeah, 15.6 for esports and cryptocurrency.
You forgot one venture capital investment.
Oh, which one? What did we miss?
The famous Gamemasters. They got $650,000. So this, I just, I think this is important to mention because
$650,000.
I think,
what is this?
I think this is a clear example of a bad investment in the space.
Really? Even at that low?
Yes, because Gamemasters, they're trying to do everything. So they are, I never heard of them before, but they're an online tournament platform where people can play against each other for money. Similar, we talked about skills last week, but this is more really big esports titles. So, you have Battle 5, which is more of a tournament platform, which is doing a lot better. But you have, I think, P2P Live is now doing the same thing.
Live,
PvP Live, yeah. MLG used to have their tournament platform, which wasn't
Game Battles.
Yeah, Game Battles. So it's one of those platforms, right? And then they're at the same time they're also an esports agency. So their whole spiel was, what with the NBA 2K league, we represent 2 or 3 of the best NBA 2K players. What if we get the LeBron James of NBA 2K? And their whole plan was, we have this platform and we can see who's really good, and then we can get them to our agency. The problem is, when I look at a startup, which they really are, I'm always critical of, number one, are there other people doing the same thing but better? And there are a lot of people in this space that are doing the exact same thing and already have an established user base.
Yep.
And then secondly, are you a company or are you a combination of different ideas put together? And they are the latter. They are really a combination of buzzwords in an industry that's already one big buzzword. They're a tournament platform, they're an agency particularly focused on, I think at this point, traditional sports, esports titles. And I think there were just some investors who just saw that and who don't understand the space good enough, and who are just like, I'll put money behind this because I want to get into this.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, when you're doing this many things, it's a $650,000 education on esports. They're trying to see how all these different aspects of traditional sports work in esports and what the difficulties are. So yeah, listen, if you have somebody who's willing to pay $650,000 to try and figure out this space before they commit a larger amount, okay, I can understand that. Do I think that they're going to ever see this $650,000 again? Probably not from this investment, but maybe somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
And I believe our last story was that the University of North Texas is set to open a $200,000 esports facility. I mean, that's a pretty big spend for an esports facility.
Yeah, I think there was another similar college who's opening up their esports program. I forgot the exact college name, but it's just one of those stories that you're seeing colleges take esports more serious, which once again ties into our original story about the NCAA. What is interesting to see with this facility is that anyone associated with the university, whether you're a student, staff, or faculty, can be eligible to play. However, the primary use will be given to University of North Texas students, part of the club, the esports club. And I think this is interesting because here we're seeing esports being treated like it's a basketball court, which I think is great. I think it's amazing to see that we have gone so far to the point that similar, we'll see a future in the near future, even in North Texas, where it's a possibility to say, hey, let's go to the esports facility and play league. They have great monitors and they have great setup, similar to how I would used to go to my basketball court in my university to play pickup. And I think that's an awesome idea.
And I think I would not be surprised if they're trying to do this before the NCAA gets involved, so that whatever regulations the NCAA puts on facilities, they can just be grandfathered in.
Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I hate to fake out the viewers at home, but we did have actually one more story, which was BMW becoming a partner for the EU LCS. I think that this is a great pickup for the EU LCS. We saw Mercedes get involved earlier in the month. I believe Subaru has an activation as well, where they're running a tournament. We've seen Millennial pick up. They bought a company that I believe executes esports tournaments for racing games.
Okay.
And I mean, it seems like the auto industry is heating up for esports.
I think it's great. I mean, BMW and the EU LCS does make sense to me. A lot of times, and I know from working with brands, usually the HQ makes the big decisions when it comes to one kind of direction. So BMW obviously is a German brand, so I'm assuming the German HQ made this decision. What is good to see is that they pick the finals, and it's great to see that the creme de la creme of esports, and an LCS final is getting the sponsors that they deserve, the sponsors that they should have gone 2-3 years ago. Because BMW knows that while they're a luxury car brand, they aren't Ferraris. They are affordable for people that are kind of upper middle class. And they know that probably the future generation of upper middle class consumers in Europe are the same people who are watching League of Legends right now. So I think from a consumer demographic background, it makes complete sense.
So yeah, I think there are two interesting aspects to this deal. I think that one, I don't think that the EU LCS was struggling for sponsors. I think that they always pick maybe one or two, and then if anything, Riot is incredibly averse to attaching sponsors to their product. I think the other part that's interesting is that both of these deals are somewhat European based. Am I correct in that reasoning? With Dota 2 having the Eastern European audience from Mercedes,
yes,
and EU LCS being the only recipient of the BMW sponsorship.
Yes, it is European based, but they're also both European car brands.
Yeah, but both of they do pretty well in North America as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But for a lot of these brands, this is a big investment, but it's also getting their feet wet. If they see that the EU LCS does well, maybe next year they'll become the sponsor of the franchise model in the US as well.
You don't think that these deals were done by regional centers? So it's how BMW Europe or Mercedes Europe.
I think they're being done by the HQ.
Central?
Because a
global?
lot of times the HQ is overlaps with the regional office at the same time.
So what do you think is preventing these brands from activating, or any auto brands activating on that type of a scale in North America?
I think it's the fact that it's regional brands. I had a conversation earlier this week with someone who sells sponsorships for some of the top teams in the world, and he was saying, we kind of reached to the same conclusion that what's the difficulty is with targeting with tier 1 brands is that the moment you talk about America, the moment you say this is a team that has 50% of their audience is American, they're saying that's not enough because esports is so global. Let's say it's a Mercedes.
So do they want diversity or a greater amount of Americans?
Mercedes-Benz US, North America, wants to have, when they sponsors, let's say the Yankees, they target a 90% American audience.
Yeah.
And esports, because it's inherently global, is targeting more of a bigger audience. Now, if you go to the HQ, it's easier for them to convince it because they can kind of justify it. On one hand,
they'll see it across the board.
On one hand, our main focus is Europe, which we're getting because it's the EU LCS, and the vast majority of viewers will be from Europe, or a large majority of viewers. Well, at the same time, if we get some global, it doesn't matter because it's a decision made from HQ, so they can sign off on that.
And to tie that into one of our earlier stories, maybe that's a strategic aspect of the Overwatch League, because if you start building these local brands, you can start activating on a regional level.
Absolutely.
So I guess that makes sense. But regardless, it's great to see just auto brands activate in space. Guys, I think that's going to do it for this show. You can find me on Twitter at JokerCanSpell. There's no E. It's linked in the description. Mo, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Moishe Eisman, which is MOISHIEISENMANN. Once again, I promise I will change my username soon. I just need to think of something original.
Should we crowdsource that?
Kind of like I'll have Twitter McTwitterface.
Yeah.
What is important to mention is that our podcast is now also available on Stitcher. So if you're an Android user, no need to go to YouTube. You can go straight to Stitcher, download the app, and we will be there. We're hopefully will be on iTunes within the next couple of weeks as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys if you made it this far, and feel free to reach out if you have any comments, questions, or concerns about any of the stories that we covered.
I will see you next week.